Story 1. The air in the mine shaft was thick, a cloying mix of damp earth, ancient dust, and something else. Something metallic and faintly acrid, like old blood. We'd descended for what felt like hours, the beam of my headlamp cutting a shaky yellow swathe through an oppressive, ink-black darkness. Liam, ever the optimist, was a few steps ahead, his own light bouncing off the rough-hewn walls. Sarah was right behind me, her breathing a little too fast, a little too shallow. "You sure about this, Mark?" She'd rasped earlier, her voice already strained. "It's just an old coal mine, Sarah," I'd replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Been closed for 50 years, nothing in here but bats and rust." But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. The silence was the first thing that got to you. Not a natural silence, but a heavy, waiting kind of quiet, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Every so often, a drip of water would echo, impossibly loud, somewhere out of sight, making us both jump. It wasn't just the falling water, it was the echo itself. It seemed to linger, to warp, to sound like footsteps, or a whispered word, just beyond the reach of our lights. Liam stopped abruptly, his light fixing on a section of the tunnel wall. "Whoa. Look at this." I moved up beside him. Scratched into the rock, crude but distinct, was a single word. L-E-A-V-E. "Spook," Liam said, a nervous chuckle escaping him. "Probably some kids messing around back in the day." Sarah's breath hitched behind me. "It looks fresh." I ran a gloved finger over the letters. They were indeed sharp, with no discernible grime or moss. It was unnerving, but I tried to push it away. Could be from when they were sealing it up. Who knows? We pushed on, the tunnel narrowing, the walls pressed in, the rough rock seeming to bulge and contract in the periphery of my vision. The metallic tang in the air grew stronger. I could feel my own heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic jackhammer in the suffocating stillness. Every creak of our boots on the uneven ground felt like a gunshot. Then we heard it, a soft scrape, like stone against stone, from further ahead. Liam froze. "What was that?" "Wind?" I suggested, my voice barely a whisper. But there was no wind. The air was dead, stagnant. We strained our ears. Silence. Then, another scrape, closer this time. It was rhythmic, deliberate, not the random settling of earth. "Hello?" Liam called out, his voice a thin, reedy sound that seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. No answer. Only the unnerving echo of his own voice, distorted and mocking. Sarah grabbed my arm, her grip like a vice. Her knuckles were white. "Mark, I want to go back." "Just a little further," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're almost to the main cavern. That's what the old maps showed. But the thought of a cavern, a larger space, offered little comfort. It just meant more places for whatever was making those sounds to hide." We rounded a bend, and the tunnel opened slightly. My beam swept across a pile of rotten timber, then a discarded pickaxe, crusted with rust and decay. And then, on the far wall, illuminated by Liam's wavering light, were more carvings. Not just words this time, but crude, disturbing figures. Stick figures with elongated limbs, contorted in poses of agony. And above them, again and again, the single word, "Leave." A profound cold descended, not just on my skin, but deep into my bones. It felt ancient, malevolent. The air grew heavy, harder to breathe, as if something was physically pressing down on us. Then, the sound started again. Not scraping this time, but faint, almost imperceptible rustling, like dry leaves skittering across stone. It seemed to be coming from all around us now, a whisper of movement just at the edge of our hearing. It was the sound of something watching. "Did you hear that?" Sarah whimpered, her voice trembling. "Yeah," Liam breathed, his light dancing erratically. "It's like it's moving." My own headlamp beam landed on a small alcove just ahead. For a split second, in the blinding glare, I thought I saw something. A flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper blackness. It was too quick to be sure, too indistinct to describe, but the impression was chillingly clear. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it was looking at us. And then, as suddenly as it began, the rustling stopped. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, leaving behind only the suffocating silence and the metallic tang. "Let's go," I said, my voice hollow. "Now." We didn't run. We couldn't. Our movements were clumsy, hampered by fear and the uneven terrain. We stumbled back the way we came, our beams frantically scanning the walls, half expecting to see something emerge from the darkness. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every drip of water sounded like a deliberate, mocking laugh. We scrambled out of the mine shaft into the faint twilight, gasping for fresh air, our lungs burning. We didn't speak for a long time, just leaned against the rusting frame of the entrance, the memory of the oppressive darkness still clinging to us like a shroud. Later, safely back in the car, the engine a comforting rumble, Liam finally broke the silence. "What do you think it was, Mark?" I shook my head. The image of that fleeting shadow burned into my mind. "I don't know." But it wasn't just an abandoned mine. The air in the car, though stale, felt clean. But the chill remained. And for days afterward, the faintest sound in the dead of night, the creak of a floorboard, the distant rumble of traffic, would send a jolt of primal terror through me, reminding me of the silence we had disturbed and the unseen presence that had made us understand, with absolute certainty, that we were not welcome. Story 2. The air changes the moment you pass the threshold. Outside, it's the crisp, pine-scented breath of the Sierra foothills. Inside the maw of the Iron Mare mine, it's a cold, dead thing. It smells of wet rock, of rust, and of something else. A deep, cellar-stale scent of time itself. There were 3 of us. Liam, who'd been doing this for years, considered himself a historian of forgotten places. Chloe, his girlfriend, was a photographer, chasing the haunting beauty of decay. And me, Mark. I was just there for the thrill, the bragging rights of crawling into a place the world had sealed up and left for dead. "Headlamps on. Stay close." Liam's voice was muffled by the enclosed space, the sound swallowed by the darkness just beyond our beams. The gate was a cage of rusted iron bars we'd managed to pry open just enough to squeeze through. It groaned shut behind us with a final metallic sigh. A period at the end of a sentence. The first 100 feet were easy. The main adit was wide enough to walk 3 abreast, shored up with massive timbers thick with a damp, pale fungus. Our headlamps cut cones of dancing light, illuminating the glittering flecks of pyrite in the rock, fool's gold. The only sounds were our own, the crunch of gravel under our boots, the rustle of our jackets, the soft, rhythmic puff of our breathing. It's the silence between those sounds that gets to you first. It's not just quiet. It's a presence. A heavy, listening silence that presses in on your eardrums. "Hear that?" Chloe whispered, stopping so abruptly I almost walked into her. We froze. I strained my ears, hearing only the thrum of my own blood. "Hear what?" "Nothing," she said, her voice small. "That's the problem. Not even a drip." She was right. Mines are supposed to be wet. They weep. But this place was bone dry and unnervingly still. Liam shrugged it off. Deeper shafts probably drained this level dry. Come on. We went deeper. The main tunnel narrowed, forcing us into single file. The air grew thicker, colder. I could feel the weight of the mountain above us, a billion tons of granite pressing down. My breathing felt tight in my chest. It's a common feeling. They call it tunnel dread. You just have to breathe through it. That's when we heard the first real noise. It was a faint, metallic scrape. Far ahead, down the tunnel and maybe around a bend. Skrrr. Ape. Liam held up a hand. We stood motionless, our beams painting a frantic, overlapping circle on the rock wall ahead. The sound didn't repeat. Probably a loose rock settling, Liam said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Or an old ore cart shifting. We kept going, but the spell was broken. The sense of adventure had curdled into a tight knot of apprehension in my gut. Every crunch of my own boots sounded like a footstep behind me. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my headlamp beam slicing into an impenetrable, absolute black. We reached a junction, a fork in the tunnel. To the left, the tunnel continued its gentle slope. To the right, a shaft descended steeply into the earth, a rickety ladder of iron rungs bolted to the rock, disappearing into darkness. "Let's check the main tunnel first," Chloe said, her voice tight. As she spoke, an echo came back. Not of her voice, but something else. A whisper. It was formless, like the sibilant rush of wind through a crack. But there was no wind. It seemed to come from all directions at once. We all looked at each other, faces pale in the stark lamplight. "Air pressure change," Liam mumbled, but his eyes were wide. He was trying to convince himself as much as we were. We took the left tunnel. It was smaller here. The ceiling was low, forcing us to stoop. The walls were so close I could brush them with both shoulders. This is where the real claustrophobia began. The feeling wasn't just of being in a tight space. It was the feeling of being swallowed. The rock felt alive, like the throat of some immense sleeping creature. Then, the tapping started. Tap, 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 tap. It was rhythmic, precise. It sounded exactly like a geologist's hammer striking rock. It came from ahead of us, from the darkness we were walking into. We stopped dead. This was no settling rock. This was not the wind. "Liam?" I whispered, the sound barely escaping my lips. He didn't answer. He was staring down the tunnel, his jaw clenched. The tapping continued, steady, methodical. It was a working sound, the sound of someone patiently doing a job. The three of us stood there for what felt like an eternity, caught in the hypnotic rhythm. The sound wasn't getting closer, but it wasn't getting farther away either. It was just there, waiting. "Okay," Liam finally breathed, his voice a strained rasp. "We're turning back." Now, there was no argument. We turned, moving with a desperate, clumsy haste. As we did, the tapping stopped. The sudden, profound silence that replaced it was 1,000 times worse. The listening feeling was back, intensified. I felt like a mouse that had just heard the owl's wings go silent overhead. It knew we were there. It had stopped its work to watch us go. As we scrambled back towards the fork, another sound reached us from the main tunnel we'd come from, the path to our exit. It was a soft, shuffling noise, a drag, like a heavy burlap sack filled with sand being pulled slowly over loose rock, and with it, a faint scrape, skr, ape, the same sound from before. But now it was in front of us, between us and the way out. Panic, cold and electric, seized me. We were trapped between a sound that had been waiting ahead and another that had crept up behind. Chloe let out a small, stifled sob. Liam grabbed her arm, pulling her towards him. "The ladder," he hissed, his light jerking towards the dark shaft. "Down. We go down. Maybe it connects to another exit." It was a terrible idea, descending blind into the guts of the earth, but the sound of that dragging shuffle was getting louder. We had no choice. Liam went first, testing each iron rung with his foot before putting his weight on it. Chloe followed, her face a mask of terror. I was last. As I gripped the cold, rust-pitted rungs and swung my legs into the abyss, I risked a look down the main tunnel. My beam cut through the darkness, and for a fraction of a second, I saw nothing. There was no one there. But the sound was closer now, and the air that drifted from the tunnel was foul, carrying a new scent beneath the damp rock and rust. It was a cloying, coppery smell, the smell of old blood. Then I heard my own voice. "Mark," it whispered, clear as day, from the darkness of the tunnel. It wasn't an echo. The inflection was wrong. It was a flat, curious, hollow imitation. I didn't wait. I scrambled down the ladder, my hands slipping on the damp iron. Below me, Liam and Chloe were descending into the crushing black. Above, the shuffling grew louder. I don't know how deep we went. Time ceased to have meaning. There was only the next rung, the burn in my arms, the hammering of my heart against my ribs. We finally spilled out onto the floor of a lower tunnel, gasping in the stale, dead air. We didn't stop. We ran. We ran blind, our headlamp beams bouncing frantically, showing us nothing but endless, suffocating rock. We took turns we didn't recognize, stumbled through flooded sections that soaked our boots with freezing water, and all the while, we listened. We never heard the tapping or the shuffling again. But we heard something else. Faint, and far behind us, we heard a perfect hollow echo of Chloe's sob. Then, a moment later, a flat, toneless imitation of Liam's harsh breathing. It was collecting our sounds, learning us. Hours passed. Our lights began to dim. Hope, which had been a flickering candle, was all but extinguished. And then, a miracle. A breath of air that didn't taste of the grave. Faintly, so faintly, I could smell pine. We stumbled towards it, crying with relief, and emerged from a collapsed fissure on the side of the mountain, half a mile from where we entered. We clawed our way through ferns and dirt into the twilight, blinking at the bruised purple sky. We never spoke about what happened. We couldn't. How do you explain a sound? How do you describe a silence that listens? There was no ghost, no monster I could draw a picture of. There was only the weight of the mountain, the absolute darkness, and the chilling certainty that we were not alone down there. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I think I can still hear it. A faint tapping, deep in the earth. And I know, with a coldness that has nothing to do with the temperature, that it's just patiently working, waiting.